Hey friends, so I'm at the John P. Seitz Jr. gunsmithing shop, and this is where I work now Thursdays through Saturdays as the historical gunsmith. And this is actually the oldest still functioning historical gun shop in America since they got it reopened. And so Seitz Jr. apprenticed underneath his father in Virginia, and they both moved here. His dad set up his shop in Boonville, Missouri, and then Junior set up his shop right here in Arrow Rock, Missouri. And so this shop was turned into a car garage several years ago, and the Friends of Arrow Rock purchased the building back and closed the garage door back in and turned it back into the original gun shop again. So anyway, it's pretty neat piece of history. So if you get a chance, and if you're in the area up by Columbia, Missouri, or if you're on your way to Kansas City on I-70, it's just 11 miles or so off of I-70. Be sure to swing in and say hi to me, and I'll show you the gun shop. And so in this shop I actually forge the barrels and forge the locks and all the parts for the lock. And so of course I'm still learning, and so I apprenticed in Williamsburg, Virginia under Richard Sullivan, and he taught me everything I know as far as smithing goes. And so it's a lifelong experience of learning, and I sure love what I do. But today I'm working on a Davis lock. A Davis makes a good lock, and so with most of my firearms that I build, I order the parts, just same as most anybody does. It's more affordable, and you can't stay in business if you're doing everything hand forged, just because you have to ask too much money. You've got too much time and too much labor involved. And not everybody can write a $20,000 or $30,000 check for a completely handmade rifle. And so although I do offer that, but the most common is I'll order the parts, and then I can transition the parts as well. So if the part's not fitting the style that I'm trying to build, but I have something that's close, then I can take the part and make it what I want it. And even Chambers, he sells a kit lock that comes as a plate. It's all the internal parts and everything done, but the plate itself, you can form that to anything you want. In this case, this customer, he's out of Virginia, and he wants a banana-shaped lock. And Davis is one of the only ones that is making a banana lock, but they're only in flat face, and this customer wants a round face. And Davis used to make a round face banana lock, but no longer does. So I'm going to take this flat face Davis lock, and I'm going to transition it to a round face. So the first step that you do is you have to have a couple tools to be able to do this. You have to have a mainspring vise, and you can order these from Track of the Wolf, Muzzleloader Builder Supply. I get mine from Larry Callahan. Larry Callahan makes these, and he also makes bag molds as well for any rifle that you have. And so, but I use two mainspring vices to take a lock apart. One for the mainspring, one for the hammer spring. And so the first thing we have to do is disassemble this lock. So what I do is I cock it back to half cock, the first click you hear, and that rises the mainspring up to its halfway position. And then after that's done, now I can take, so this one has a screw on the inside right here that's holding the mainspring in. So since it's on half cock, I can go ahead and remove that screw. So I'm going to do that now. When you remove the parts, make sure that you lay them out on the table, or put them all like in a magnet, some type of magnet thing, or a cup of some sort, so that way you don't lose all your parts. But I'm going to take that out, and now I'm going to put the mainspring vise in. And the good thing about these Callahan mainspring vices is the bottom arm slides any direction, so it can fit any mainspring it is. I'm not going to tighten it. I'm just going to add pressure, just kind of snug it with your hand, and now I can let the cock down to its resting position, and then the mainspring pops right out. Leave the spring in the vise. If you take the clamp off, or if you take the vise off of the spring, sometimes it's hard to get it back on, because now you're having to turn it to get that pressure squeeze together to get the mainspring back in. So I just leave them on the vices until I'm ready to assemble it back again. So next step is we have these internal parts still. So I'm going to start with the sear spring. So with this sear spring, I'm going to loosen that screw up just 3 or 4 turns, and it pops loose just like that. So now it's just flopping around, but that takes the pressure off the sear here. So now I can come in here and I can remove these screws on the bridle. Take the bridle off. And I'm just going to loosen them up until they are completely loose, and then I can pull the bridle directly off, and there's your sear as well, came off as well. I'll lay those on the table here. Now I can take the sear spring off. Lay it there, and I leave the bolts in the holes that they go, so that way I don't lose track. It's not hard to figure out which screw goes in which hole. If you do take them completely out, it's not hard to figure it out anyway. But now all you have left is the tumbler sitting in the lock there, and this is the fly. The fly is used for set triggers. If you're using a single trigger, you don't necessarily need the fly, but it is part of the lock. So even with a single trigger, I'll leave it on the lock just because it's part of the lock. But I go ahead and remove it, and when you remove the fly, you need to make sure you know where you put it, because if you drop that on the floor, trust me, you will not find it. Even if your floor is clean, you probably won't find it. So as soon as it drops, you might as well pull your phone out and start ordering a new one if you have set triggers. So now I'm going to I took this, the cock screw out. Whoops. Took the cock screw out, and I'm going to lay it there, and now it's just on a square lug on the tumbler, square leg. So now I'm going to try to put my turn screw in between the lock plate and the cock, and there it just popped right off. So there's the cock. Lay it to the side, and now the tumbler will pop right out. There's your tumbler. So now is when you need your second mainspring vise. So on this Davis lock, his screw is on the inside that holds the hammer spring in place. One leg moves, it flexes, it has to, and then the other one is attached. So as you can see, the top leg is the one that moves. Okay, so I'm going to take my mainspring vise, put it on here, and just add a little pressure just to get it off of the hammer. On flintlocks, on the early names of certain parts, what we call the frizzen today was actually called the hammer or the battery or the steel. And so there is a newspaper article, I believe from the 1770s, that does mention a frizzen, although it was very uncommon to call it that back then. There's your hammer spring. So now all we have is the steel to remove, and it's just that bolt right there. So I'm going to take it off. There it is. I'm going to leave it in the steel. Lay it on my table. Now we're down to the lock plate, and that's all we've got. So what I'm going to do is, as you can tell, this lock plate is a flat face. So I'm going to chuck it in the vise, and how I hold these in the vise, you can make jigs to hold them as well, wooden blocks, jigs, and screw them in place, and that's probably the best way to do it, and I'll probably end up doing that before I'm done, just because certain areas are hard to get when it's just in your vise. But if you put it in the vise, I just clamp it on the bolster, and that's all I do. I let the fence, the pan fence here, overhang my vise, so I'm not putting any pressure on the fence, because you'll mar that up in your vise. And so I'm just clamping this part of the bolster in the vise, and then I can start taking files and start rounding this off, And so since it bevels around the edges, I'll just hit the top edge of the bevel and start rounding it all the way around. And so that way the lock is still pretty dang flat when it's done. But by first glance and looking at it, it has a round appearance. And even round face locks, they're very gradual arches. There's not much there, but it's actually more deceiving to the eye. So there's actually not near as much curve in them as you think there is. And so maybe on the newer casting locks, there's actually more curve than a lot of the originals would have had. A lot of the originals are very, very light curves. But anyway, I'm going to chuck this in the vise, and I'm going to start rounding this off. Okay, so as you can see, I've got it in the vise here. Here's what I was talking about. The fence is overhanging the vise. It's not in the vise itself. So that way there's no pressure on my fence right here, and I'm not jacking it up. And so now I'm going to start taking files and just start rounding this off. So you guys are going to have to forgive me, shot by myself. So it's hard for me to film things by myself. So some days I might be able to get someone in here that can help me film to do certain videos, but it's just hard to do that sometimes. And so in the winter months here, we're pretty slow, and so I'm able to do more videoing in the winter time. So right now we're in the peak of summer. It's August 8th here today. And so in August we're pretty busy. We got a lot of tourists and stuff. So anyway, so if someone walks in, obviously I got to try to hide my phone real quick. But anyway, I'm gonna go to rounding this off, and then I'll come back and show you all what it looks like as I go along. So stay tuned. Okay, just so you can kind of see the progress, you can see how I'm rounding this off. So I'm taking this bevel off and just rounding it. And so that's what we got so far. I've worked on this a little bit and rounding it off. And so I'm using a pretty coarse file. So here's the file I'm using just to get the bulk off. And then I'll come back with a finer file, and then a finer file, and then a finer file. And you just keep using finer and finer files until you have it shined. And so typically I don't shine a lock until the rifle's completely done. And so just because you end up just getting stuff all over it and everything else, it's one of the last things I do is shine the lock. But as far as the barrel goes, you do want to draw file the barrel before you inlet it in the stock, just because just draw filing a little bit can change the overall thickness of the barrel, and it can create a gap between your stock and your barrel. And you wouldn't think that it would matter that much, but it kind of does. You can notice a little bit of difference if you don't draw file your barrel first. So, but for locks, typically I just leave them dull like this when I start, and then I inlet it in the stock and everything else, get it functioning, and then after even after the stock is completely stained and finished, then I'll usually put this back and take the lock completely apart and reshine all the parts. Not reshine, but shine the parts. So, but here's the progress. So you can see it rounding off, and that's what we're looking for. So I'll be back in a minute. Alright, so this is after about 30 minutes of filing. So it goes pretty quick to transition a lock. So I'm pretty well done with the coarse file now. And now I'm going to a little bit finer file. And so with finer files, you actually want to put some chalk in them. And so well, really for any file, but just trying to hold the camera here, but put some chalk on the teeth, and that helps keep the shavings from building up so bad in the teeth. And so, sorry, just like that, and that just helps keep the shavings from building up in the teeth so bad. And so that way you don't put extra scratches in your work while you're filing. If the shavings start building up in your teeth and you keep filing, you'll continue putting scratches in it, because the shavings caught in your teeth are actually scratching the surface and cutting them deeper. So just keep your files clean, And it does help that after several strokes or whatever with the file to give it a couple taps on the vise or on your table or whatever, and that helps knock the shavings out of the teeth as well. And so another thing with filing is you want to use, as I stated earlier, finer and finer files as you go, and also change the direction that you're filing. So you can see that the cut marks are going this way at about a 45-degree angle or so. So the next direction I come in will be right against them, coming in the opposite way. And that gets rid of those teeth and also shines it more. And then after you have the whole surface done that way, then you come in with another fine file and come in straight across this way. And so you just keep working your angles like that, and it takes all the scratches out. If you look really close at original lock plates and side plates, trigger guards, whatever, butt plates, you can always still see file marks in their work. Sometimes on brass you won't see them just because they've handled the brass so much throughout its lifetime that even their hand has wore off the file marks off of the butt plates and trigger guards. But a lot of times on lock plates and stuff you can still see faint file marks in their work, and that's just because that's what they had. And so still yet to this day, when I'm doing stuff like this, I take care with it, and I want it to be the best I can make it with files, but I do it with files. And so that way you can actually still see a few file marks in it here and there. It makes it look like it was handmade, just like the originals were. And so you just get that look that you're going for. So anyway, but I'm going to keep continuing on, keep rounding this. You can kind of see how I've rounded off the edges. And so the middle is still pretty flat, and that's what you want. You're literally just rounding the edges off to where the whole thing looks like it's rounded. If you look at it from this angle, it looks really rounded. Let me get my phone focused here. It looks really rounded, but if you get on the side, you can still see it's flat. And so, but that's kind of the look you're going for. Anyway, I'll be back. Alright, lock plate is done. I got it rounded off. So, then got the pan here kind of shined up a little bit. But that's it. That was about 45 minutes of filing total. So it's pretty amazing what a file can do in just a short period of time. And so, but it's just real subtle rounding, just to make the whole thing have the rounded appearance that you're going for. So anyway, I hope that helps. And so now I will start working on the cock. And so I've got to round the cock as well. And so it's got the same contour, squared edges, kind of beveled along the edges. So I'll just take my file and round them off the same way I did the lock plate, or the lock plate. And that way it'll all kind of match and flow together. It just kind of looks odd with a round-faced lock plate and then a square-faced or a flat-faced cock. So anyway, so I'll round that off, and then that's it. That's all it is. One thing I did forget to mention is when you put the cock in the vise here, I use leather, and so the vise doesn't crimp onto the stem up here, but also the way the stem is made, it's got a bow in it, and so if you put the bow in the vise, you're putting a lot of pressure on that bowed area, and you can break it or at least bend it, and so you don't want to do that. So by using leather, you can crimp down pretty dang tight without messing that up. And so, because it kind of smushes into the leather, and it's still holding it firm enough where it doesn't move around on you. So now I can take a file and round these edges off. So anyway, I just needed to tell you all that. Okay, so here it is. Still got a little bit of work to do to get. You can turn it in the light, and you can kind of still see some lines where I need to round it just a little bit more. But that's pretty well it. I got it rounded. This part here where the cock screw goes into the tumbler here, you want to leave it flat because the bottom of the screw head needs to sit flat on the cock there. So that way it has a good fit. But anyway, that's pretty well it. Now we will assemble this thing back together, I am going to take a graver, and I'm going to punch some teeth up in the jaws here, on the top jaw and this jaw here. Punch some teeth up, and that helps grab a hold of the leather to hold your flint in place, and then it won't want to let go near as bad, which is what you want. So anyway, but I'll do that, and then I will show you all how to put the lock back together. Okay, so now I'm going to reassemble the lock for y'all. So we got our lock plate here. The first thing that goes in is the tumbler again. So tumbler goes in the biggest hole here. So pop it in here, just like that. So there's the tumbler. And now, that little piece I told you don't lose, there's the fly. So put it in. Alright, and this rifle that I'm building here, this particular rifle, it will have set triggers. So it will need that fly. So there's the fly in place there. So next up is the bridle. So I'm going to put the bridle in place. It goes on just like this. I'll go ahead and put this screw in. Maybe. There we go. Be right back. Okay, sorry about that. Had a guest come in. Alright, so we got our tumbler in, we got the bridle started in there with one screw in, and so now we're going to put the sear in. So I'm going to put the sear, actually, sorry, nope, not the sear. The sear spring. Put the sear spring in, and how I do that is I just put it on the lock plate with the screw in it, and line the screw up with where it goes, and hold the spring in place, and take your turn screw and thread that bolt in. And I don't get it all the way tight, so that way it still swivels around. So now I can put the sear in, put it in place, that bolt in, tighten it up, okay. And now I can pop that spring in place, and you should hear it. Maybe. There we go. There it is. Clicked in place, and now with holding tension with my finger, now I can tighten that screw up. Just like that. Alright. So there's that. So now we put the mainspring or the cock back on. So we put the cock on right here. Let everything down at rest. So there the cock's on. And now I'm going to slide the mainspring back in. Just like that. Once you have the mainspring in with the clamp still on, cock it back to half cock. And that takes the pressure off of your clamp or off your vise and puts it back onto the spring. So now you can take your spring vise off, just like that. And I'm going to put this little screw back in, a little hole there for the mainspring. Okay, there's that. And now, well, darn it. This is tricky. See, some locks are like this and some aren't, so I forgot. I have to put the vise back on and take the mainspring back off for a second. You know what? I'm human. I forget things. down. I have to put the steel spring back on. So by doing that, I'm going to put the steel back in place here. Long-winded. There's that. Put the spring back on. Just like that. Whoops. In there. Now this little bitty screw goes in there to hold the hammer spring on. Just like that. And now I can take that off. Now, put the cock back on. Back to half cock. I'm going to go ahead and put the cock screw in. And if the cock's not seated down, don't try to tighten that screw up to seat the cock in to the tumbler. That it's only a 632 thread, and so you will snap that thing off. So, all right, I'll let the cock back down, put the mainspring back in, just like that. Half cock, take the mainspring off, and now put that little screw back in there. There it is. Now, put the top jaw on. Just like that. There's your reassembled lock. Round face now instead of flat. Very Germanic style, banana shaped. Very common on early styles. So there you have it. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Hoped it helped. Once again, I apologize for the filming. It's just I'm doing what I can. I'm all by myself, so like I say, eventually we'll get somebody in here, especially during the winter months when we're slower, to actually record me doing a lot of stuff, so that way it's a lot better footage, so you guys can really see what I'm doing. And so, but this was kind of just self-explanatory, so I wanted to do a video on it and just kind of guide you through it and show you how it's done. And so, but now we have a round face Germanic lock, and so now we're going to start building an early Virginia style rifle out of it. And so it'll have a 38-inch tapered and flared and squared barrel, and it'll all be iron hardware. I'm hand forging all the iron for it. I've already got the trigger guard forged out, and I'm working on the butt plate now. And so get the butt plate forged and filed out, and then start making a rifle. Anyway, take care, y'all. Thanks for watching.